Indeed we have. Look at this. This is so exciting. As you can see, there are some stripes in amongst the lions there. So as we thought, one of the zebras unfortunately met its end. So for those of you that are a little bit squeamish, this is maybe not where you would want to watch and maybe just close your eyes, but the Nkuhuma Pride managed to kill a zebra, and the Birmingham is here and everybody is feasting. And I think they've killed this zebra probably in the early hours of this morning, because the cubs' tummies are not very big. All the adult females have massive stomachs, but the Birmingham male and the cubs' tummy are not very full at all. Now, there is going to be a little bit of interest here, because he who must not be named has come in and may actually chase all of these lions at this stage, so let's hope that that passes quickly. But the cubs are having a full-on feast, and you can see how much of the zebra has been eaten. We know the last time we saw the Nkuhumas that they were thin and they needed a meal, and now look at those stomachs in the background. The females are massive, so they've definitely gotten really good nutrients out of this, and now we know why the zebras were so sort of worried about what was going on and making a big fuss and calling. This has got to be from that particular herd of zebra, and it just shows you how far they've chased to be able to actually get them. So really quite amazing. So a comment from James R.A. Hendry, all the way from the Masai Mara. That's very impressive that the Nkuhuma Pride made a kill. Well, James Henry, indeed it is very impressive, and I'm certainly very glad that you are back in the Masai Mara. It's good to see your face out that side again, and I hope you are having a wonderful time and that you enjoyed your trip to Italy, because I'm sure James must have loved the culture and the food and everything that goes along with being in Italy. So I'm very glad that James is back though, and I'm sure he's going to have an epic time in the Masai Mara now with Brent and Jamie, and it's pretty much the last of our crew have all arrived there, and so the team up there is now complete, which is fantastic. But this is so cool. I'm so excited, and not because the zebra is dead, but more because the Nkuhuma Pride just needed that meal, and the fact that they're finding food here on Djuma means that hopefully they're going to spend more time in this area. Hopefully we're going to get a sign that they're going to hang around, start hunting. And I can see Amber Eyes in the back there. You see, she's here. So if she is the mother, then she's just gotten really good nutrients. You can see her eyes very clearly. There we go. That's definitely our girl Amber Eyes. Those dark, deep amber coloured eyes are very diagnostic. You can't miss her. And so she's had a good meal, which is great. And so far I can only see 3 lionesses. I think there are 4 here, but I can only see the 3. And I saw the female with the blind eye, and she was also here. And then the other 2, I don't know who they are. There's one that's lying off in the distance quite far away, and then there's another one that's just lying off to the right of that bush there. You can see the stomach just protruding out. And so that's what I think we're going to see a lot of over the next little bit, is these guys just digesting. And it's amazing how much meat they can put away. When you look at the size of this particular zebra and you think about how much meat was on there, the fact that that's all that's left over the period of a few hours really is quite something, particularly when you think that the cubs themselves don't have full bellies, and neither does this male. Now the male, I haven't really had a good look, but I think it's Tinyo. I can't see really nicely at this stage. All I've got is his backside facing me, and to be honest, I'm so excited just to be with them that I've forgot to really look and pay attention to who he actually is. So, Michael, you're wondering at what age does the male no longer tolerate the cubs feeding at the carcass right next to him side by side? Well, Michael, I think it's once they get a little bit older and bigger and they start resembling more an adult individual. So once they start looking as though they are big enough to sort of fend for themselves, and that's normally, I would say, about 1.5 to 2 years, he's going to start getting more and more aggressive with these cubs. You can already hear every now and then there's a bit of growling from him as the cubs get a little too close. So he's going to start getting into that situation where he's going to push them away and start sort of moving them off. Once the males, or if there's a males within the pride, those get chased off first. He'll be more tolerant of the females, particularly as they get older. And once they reach 2.5, 3 years, then they definitely not. But that's definitely Tinyo. His lip is caught up on his face, and it's definitely him. So nice to see him here as well, because the other night when we saw him, he also looked like he could do with a meal. So that's really good news, and I wouldn't be surprised by the end of today or tonight that there's more than one Birmingham here, and we end up with a situation where another one is coming. And you can see there's a little bit of sort of bonding that's going to happen, and this is often what happens after a meal, is bonding does take place. They'll kind of go and groom one another and rest up next to each other, and so it is very, very cool to see. I'm so happy for the Pride. This is excellent news, and for us, like I say, at Djuma, it's great news that they're figuring out that there is food here and that they will be able to hunt here. The interesting part, and this is sort of what fascinates me about wildlife, is that we make changes in their environment, and yet they're able to utilize it and use it straight away. This road that we're on is a newly built road. It's a road that was only built last week, and I've driven it a few times and said that I'm sure it's going to be a productive one. And the Nkuhuma Pride, I have never seen their tracks coming as far south as this in the last few months. In the last 6 months, they haven't been in this area at all, and all of a sudden this new road has been cut, and they followed this new road through, and it's gone right through a section where we've seen zebra a few times. And so that means that they've worked out that there is food items already in this area, and they didn't just come down the sort of road and then just stumble upon a zebra. They were in and out of this area checking the whole time, and so they're utilizing the change in their environment just like we would. If we saw something new, we've used this road to sort of drive and check, and so have they. And it really is quite interesting how quickly they become accustomed to new areas and how they use open sections to be able to move. It's very, very interesting. The nice thing is that we tracked these guys all the way along, and thankfully we had help from Tax and Aubrey, and they checked the southern and western boundaries, so we knew that those lions had to be somewhere here, and it really made it much easier for us to find them. Now, our lions are enjoying a zebra, and they would love probably to hunt what James has got all the way in the Masai Mara, but I don't think they would even know what it is. Well, it's been such an incredible experience. The male just stood up and dragged the carcass, and he dragged the carcass and the cubs with him in an incredible display of strength. And I don't think he's going to be finished. There's also was a huge fight between Tinyo and one of the cubs. He wanted to drag the carcass. The cub didn't want to let go, and there was swatting and carrying on, and it was all quite sort of ferocious. And I don't think we've seen the end of this situation. But the nice thing is that we can see that all 6 cubs are here. So there's 3 in the front and then 3 at the back. And you can see the 4th one just coming forward, and look at how that one cub is watching Tinyo. He was the one that got a little bit of a smack from Tinyo, and so now it's just playing sort of possum and pretending like it's not going to do anything, but it's sneaking forward to try and get to that nice thick leg meat that is still on the carcass itself. So very clever little lion. But I think there's going to be a few explosive moments with this carcass, because it's starting to get less and less now. So, Ali, you want to know where's the tiny little baby lion cub? Look at these cubs creeping in. You see them? They're so cheeky. They sit on the edge and they pretend like they don't want to feed. But look, it's on its basically crawling towards the carcass. And then it knows, okay, I can't get too close to where Dad is because otherwise he's going to shout at me. So it just crawls closely. Now, Ali, sorry, I got a bit distracted because that was quite cute. But the little cub, it doesn't feed on meat yet. It's still too young to eat meat. And so it's drinking milk. And therefore, it stays in a den. It's not going to join the pride to hunt or anything like that. It's going to stay in a den and try and stay safe there. And what will happen is the mother will have maybe been here already, fed, and now goes back to that cub and goes and transfers the nutrients from the carcass via its milk into the cub itself. And so she'll go suckle the cub, and only after about 3 months will that cub then start being led to the pride, where it will start to be introduced to meat. And even then, for the first sort of month or 2, that cub will be taken to and from carcasses. It won't actually travel with the pride itself. Once they reach about 5-6 months, that's when they're then moving with the pride and with the mother, and we'll see them at the carcass more and more often. So at this stage, it's just that it's too small and it doesn't feed off meat yet. It can't process the meat, and so it needs to spend time in a den away where it's nice and safe. So James, you're wondering if these cubs are being well behaved because Tinyo is present. Well, well behaved is a bit of a sort of questionable, summary, because just now they were being naughty. They were all crowding behind Tinyo and around him, and then he got upset and he sorted them all out, and now they sort of, like naughty children who have been shouted at, have now gone to the one side of the carcass, as you can see there, and are feeding and keeping their heads down and showing quite submissive behavior, because Tinyo had to just quickly crack the whip and say, right, enough of this nonsense. And so that's why they're being well behaved now, is because they've just been disciplined. But they also know that they won't feed on his side of the carcass because he's going to get far too aggressive with them. So they've worked out that if they're on one side and he can be on the other side, then everything is fine. But as soon as they try and cross over that boundary onto his side, he gets upset, and then we'll find a situation where he'll try and chase them away. But you can see they've absolutely stripped this carcass. You would think a zebra would last a long period of time, but as you can see there, that zebra is completely gone. And this is not a small zebra. I mean, I thought it might be a baby zebra that was lost, but this is a fairly large zebra. I would say it's a sub-adult, if not an adult itself. And you can see there is very little left there. So, Larimoi, you were wondering whether this was an adult or not. And like I say, I think it's a sub-adult. It's not a fully grown big individual, but it's definitely a sub-adult. And I think maybe that's why that other female was calling, is that it's her offspring from quite a while ago. And that's why we're finding that she's so panicked about where sort of this zebra is and what's happened to it. But if we look at the cubs, they're busy feeding on the right side of there, and you can actually see there is a yellow fat content there. So that is deep yellow in color. Now, very few animals have that deep, rich yellow fat. That fat is highly nutritious. In fact, it's one of the most nutritious parts of any animal that we have out here. And that's why zebra are one of those species that lions would love to eat, because that fat content is so full of nutrients. And this is going to be a really good meal for this pride. They are going to be in a lot better shape after this, as you can see by that little cub that's got a big fat belly that is full of blood that's just rolled into. There we go, you see them fighting? So as this meat gets less, we're going to see more and more of that. Right, well, we're going to carry on enjoying our Nkuhuma pride. Ali apparently is playing hide and seek with a rather large animal. Well, James Henry, that's a lot of compliments in one sentence there, but thank you very much for that. That's very kind of you. And like I say, it's been quite quiet without James. Luckily, Byron's come in, and it's always funny when the two of them are together, because we see quite a bit of entertainment when they are together in camp. Lots of sort of baiting one another and giving each other trouble. So it is quite quiet without James, and I'm sure Byron is missing James quite a bit. I'm sure there's been a few Skype phone calls here and there to keep Byron happy. But as you can see, the status quo of things has changed slightly. Tinyo has now gone to the other side of the carcass, and all the cubs were pushed off. They had to move. The interesting thing is, a fifth lioness appeared out of nowhere behind us. I don't know where she came from, if she was here originally and we just drove past her to start, but she is here. So all 5 lionesses. We've got one on the far left who is just hidden in the grass. She's over there. So that's the one that just arrived out of nowhere. We don't know where she was, but she must have been lying in the grass. Then we've got 2 together over here. Then there's a 4th one on the right of those 2 lying next to one another, and then right at the back is the 5th lioness in the corner. Now, I don't think anyone's actually checked that 5th lioness right at the back there, but potentially, maybe the little cub is somewhere at the back there. Who knows? We might just have a little look there just now and just check in that grass and see if maybe there is some sort of sign of the little cub. But I haven't seen any tracks for it, and when we were tracking this pride, it was just the females and the cubs that were walking along, and the male joined, I think, only much later, because I found his tracks on top of all of the females' tracks coming this way. So I don't think the little cub is here, but I wonder, the female that we just noticed behind us, she definitely doesn't have any suckle marks. I don't think it's her. I think she was just resting somewhere where we couldn't see her, and she's just popped out. And since, other than her, I've been trying to check all females for suckle marks. I've only seen the one with the sort of blind eye, and she doesn't have. Then I've seen the mother, one of the mothers of these cubs, which has got 2 good eyes, but honey-coloured. She doesn't have. I haven't seen amber eyes or the young female yet, so it's one of those 2 that must have the cubs, as we surmise. But at this stage, I don't know which one. It's difficult to see. Like I say, they're lying in ways that is quite hard, and it's also, the grass is very long. And over the course of today, as they flatten the grass, so we should be able to then work out who exactly is the mother of the cubs. And particularly if we come this afternoon and one of them is missing, then we're going to know for sure. So Donald, you're wondering if the lions are going to lick this carcass completely clean, or if they're going to leave bits for others to scavenge. Now, if you have a look at that male lion, and if we turn the ambience right up and I keep quiet, you might be able to hear how rough his tongue is, and he's busy grooming every little bit that he can off of that carcass. Can you hear that? You hear how rough that is? It's almost like sandpaper. And so what he's going to do is they're going to lick as much as they can off. Ultimately, though, lions aren't as patient as some other animals, and as it gets a little bit hotter, so this lion is going to start getting a little bit kind of bored of this whole situation, and they're going to leave the ribs with little bits of meat on it, but they'll eat most of the legs, the neck, all of that, and then there'll be a few sort of internal organs that are left. I can see looks like the spleen lying off to the right of the male's tail there. You can just see it lying in the grass. So things like that, the vultures and hyenas will come and pick up later. And if we came to this carcass in, I would say, about 48 hours' time, there probably will be so little left of it. In fact, we would just find a rib cage that would be picked absolutely clean, because the one animal out here that can clean bones like no other is a hooded vulture, and they will be here by the end of today. I can tell you now, as soon as this cloud cover breaks, which it's starting to do, so the vultures are going to get up and they're going to start using the thermals to fly, and once they spot this, they're going to all come and land in this area, and then we'll have a situation where the hooded vultures get in and they'll be able to actually clean up what's going on. But look at this cub. This cub is about as deep into the carcass as it possibly can be. Look, you can't go any further in, and Tinyo is going to get cross with you now. I think it's lucky that the rib cage is protecting it at this stage. But that's quite interesting. It looks like, I know this is quite gross. Oh, it's sat back down now, but it looked like that little cub had a tapeworm hanging out of its backside, or is it just bits of the carcass? No, it was just a bit of the carcass. It almost looked like a tapeworm. Oh no, it's blood that's hanging down from its inside. So you can see there, it's a bit of grass that has blood all over it. But for a second, it looked like a tapeworm that was hanging down. You sometimes do get that situation, and because they've been sitting in blood and all kinds of other things, so the grass has taken on that color, and then the grass is just sticking to them as the blood is drying while they're feeding. So I thought maybe, I have seen it before in lions with tapeworms and Solala-pride males. At one stage, 2 of them walked around with tapeworms hanging out, or some sort of parasitic worm hanging out of their rear end, and so it does happen. I mean, you can imagine these guys eat rotting meat, and there's all kinds of things that they must pick up from it. Barefoot Spectral Owl, I like your Twitter handle, and you want to know how long a carcass would last for these guys in terms of it be viable to eat before it becomes so sort of off that they leave it alone. Well, lions, I hate to tell you, are pretty manky creatures. They'll eat carcasses that are very rotten. In fact, I've seen lions feeding off a giraffe carcass that was so rotten, the meat was green and bubbling in places, and so really not very pleasant at all. And so they will definitely eat for as long as there is meat on this carcass. You can see in this particular case, they've eaten so much that by this afternoon, which they'll still be here this afternoon, they will have cleaned up everything, and there'll be really so little left that it's not viable for them to even stay here. But theoretically, normally with lions, and when we saw that drought period where food was easy to catch, the lions were actually leaving a carcass every day. They would basically eat while it was still fresh and the blood was still flowing, but after that they would leave it and leave half buffalo all over the place. So at the end of the day, it depends on availability of food as well as the size of the carcass. I've also seen lions stay on a buffalo carcass for 4 days, so it just depends on the individuals themselves. But most of the time they eat, the rate at which they eat means that they get everything before it actually goes off too quickly. Look at him cleaning the ribs now. Isn't that cool? Yes, we're talking about you. So, John, you're wondering what organs they don't eat. Well, generally, it depends on the size of the carcass. Something like an impala, they'll pretty much eat every little bit of it, just because there's so little amount of nutrients for a pride of this size. This zebra has filled everybody up with really good meat and good nutrients, and so they can afford to leave things like the spleen and the gallbladder and those kind of things. But they will most definitely, the first thing that would have been eaten out of this would have been the heart, the kidneys, the liver. Those are all packed full of nutrients, and they're full of vitamins and minerals that they don't get just from pieces of meat, and so you'll find that those were eaten first, and then the rest of the meat was eaten, and then they'll start going into the stomach linings and the intestines and those kind of things. But often you'll find spleens, gallbladders, those sort of organs just left on the side, like that one that we saw just now. And I mean, I'm not 100% sure it is the spleen, but it's something of that description. It could even be a bit of the stomach that is there that's been emptied out. Now, we're going to, like I say, keep going with these guys, see how much of this they can actually put away in the morning, because it seems like they're just never ending, and this carcass is getting less and less and less. And while we do that, let's go all the way across to Mr. Henry, the expert, the English teacher, the man of the moment, with his waterbuck in the Masai Mara. Indeed we are, but things just erupted into aggression. Tinyo lost his rag completely and chased a whole bunch of females around and pinned one of them down and was going crazy for a second, and now he's gone back and lay down. You can actually see he's still irritated by, watch his tail. His tail's moving quite a bit and he's not very impressed at all. And I don't know what triggered it. They were all lying down and there was cubs were feeding and the lionesses were all fast asleep, and he just decided to take his aggression out on one of the lionesses and not on the cubs, and everybody scattered all over the place. And you can see those are the eyes of a rather upset male. What's wrong, boy? Are you full now and that's why you're grumpy? I don't think his time in terms of being awake is much longer now, and he's going to fall asleep fairly shortly. So, Tammy, you're wondering when the lions will have to eat again. Well, Tammy, it's a sort of dependent thing. It's almost like how long is a piece of string. Lions, in terms of when they will have to eat again, they'll have to eat probably in about, I would say, if they really became desperate, would be over a week, close to 2 weeks, until they would be absolutely famished and would need to feed again. In terms of when would they potentially hunt again, well, if a buffalo walked past here right now, you might find that they would hunt it and try and kill it. So they're such opportunistic animals that any time there's a potential food item that comes past, they'll often then try and take advantage of that. Particularly large items like buffalo, because buffalo is so scarce around here at the moment, they would then use that as a way of trying to kind of get food. But theoretically, and the kind of rough average is every sort of 3 to 4 days is what we see lions feeding at, and that's generally just factoring in their sort of hunting capability and their success rates, as well as the fact that they then start to get quite hungry and become far more active in their hunting after 2-3 days. You must remember that if it goes to a period of close to 2 weeks, they are going to have lost huge amounts of condition, and they're going to be in a situation where they're not going to be very, very healthy animals, and hunting is going to get harder and harder. The longer they go without food, the harder it becomes for these guys to actually feed themselves, and so that's why they try and hunt as quick as possible when they start to get thin. And so this is the reason why I was so excited that the Nkuhuma pride has had such a good feed, because they were starting to look quite famished, the cubs were looking quite thin, and this meal is really going to just sort of help them get back to their normal selves, which is big, thick, powerful animals that they are. But it seems like all is calming down now. Cubs are starting to feed, and Tinyo is now at least closing his eyes. It looks like he's going to have a little nap as well, so I think we'll all be okay. It was just a minor hiccup, and this is what does happen, is just the male does assert his dominance sometimes over the females. You'll find he'll kind of come in and just try and make sure that everybody knows that he is the boss of what's going on here. But interesting that he left the cubs alone. I'm pretty sure it was one of the cubs that irritated him, but so, Robert, you saying did the cubs help with the kill, or was it just the big male? Well, Robert, the big male, I think, had nothing to do with this. I think he only arrived after the fact. He was probably here when he heard them feeding, not actually present when it was killed. I think he only arrived much later. If you look at the size of the bellies of the females in relation to the male, their bellies are massive. I think they had a good feed before he found them. I think he only found them subsequently to them killing it. The cubs themselves, whether they helped in the hunt, doubt it. Things like a zebra are fast, they're very quick. These cubs are still too young, too small to be able to be participating in a hunt like that. Last year we know that the females did show these cubs how to kill a buffalo, and they had them on a buffalo and tried to kind of move around and then the buffalo was still alive and the cubs were learning how to grab it. But in a situation like this, particularly if the pride is hungry and they haven't fed very well, then you'll find that they don't really allow the cubs to do too much because they don't want to risk losing that animal. They need to be able to kill it and feed as much as possible. Last year, the reason why they were able to do that with the buffalo is that there was just an absolute sort of feast when it came to buffalo, and so all of them were able to feed and they could take their time and they could use it, and the buffalo was so weak that they weren't going anywhere once they were down on the ground, and that's why it was a good opportunity to teach them. These cubs are still too young now for hunting, and I would reckon they'll only really be participating in the hunts in probably another year's time. They're learning all the time and they're following the lionesses and they'll watch, and it was quite interesting when we were following their tracks to the point where we found them, is that you could see the females were cutting on and off the road and they were going back and forth, and the cubs, it looked like they lay down in one place and the females then did the hunting, and then the cubs were called and brought back to the kill itself where they could then start feeding. But very, very cool to see. Now, I believe we've had luck with lions, but Ali is on the search for one of the most endangered predators, and it was actually a feature of our Animal Rights Awareness Week yesterday, so hopefully she'll have some luck. Well, absolute chaos erupted in the last 5 minutes. We've had fighting, we've had the Birmingham boy dragging his carcass off. You can see he's taking it deep into the thicket. He's not having any of it. He lost his temper completely and chased everybody around, picked up the carcass and is now dragging it deep into the thickets to try and hide it away. So he's basically said, enough of all of you, I'm done, I'm taking my carcass into the bush and I'm leaving you all behind. And there was a big fight between him and one of the cubs, and he gave the cub serious hiding. And now you can see all the lionesses stood up and they've now come back to where this carcass is to try and see if there isn't any scraps that they can potentially feed it. So now that he's taken the carcass away, the rest of them can then try and see if there's something that they can eat. He doesn't let any of these lionesses anywhere near the carcass at this point. Now, Ferg, this lioness standing up here, if you can just zoom in on her teats for me, please. Is she the one who's got milk? No suckle marks there. I thought for a second, just the way she was standing, that it could have been her that's got the cubs, but it's not her. No. Right, so we'll have to just keep watching. In all the chaos, every time he chases them, I forget to look who's got suckle marks and who's the actual sort of lioness is with the cub, but hopefully in time we will. You can see she's got quite a few bite wounds on her leg as well, towards her sort of ankle part of this back.
Zoom in on the little cub sneaking in here.
So this is cub that's being very cheeky. Be careful. We're going to have a situation where that bush is just shaking, and hopefully there's not going to be a big male lion coming out of the bush. Now the cubs are cheeky. One by one they're starting to go there, and it seems like Tinyo is on his way back this side. He's just pushed the carcass in there just to cover it up for now. But let's see, because you see this cub? This cub is sort of playing coy. Tinyo is just behind that bush at the moment, and the cub is just there where he is, and just quickly gone past him. Well done. It is so cool to find lions like this. When lions are on a kill, there's so much activity that goes on, and so much sort of behavior that we don't see often from them. When they're lying down, they generally are quite sort of lazy and don't do too much. But in situations like this, it's just such an interesting study of the dynamics. And that female at the back has got to be one of the most beautiful females. Look at how perfect her condition is. So Davina, you're wondering if the moms will step in to protect the cubs from the males. Well, in this situation, no, because the females have all been given a hiding as well since we've been here. They've all been pinned down and scratched and bitten. You can actually see this female walking away from us. If we look at her tail area, look at how many bite marks she's got there. And there's fresh ones, there's claw marks. So you can see just on the right of her tail, let's go a little bit to the right there, Ferg. there you go, you can see a fresh little nick there. So they've all been hit by this male this morning as well, and so they're probably just as nervous as well. They know that also with that male is that it's just a show of bravado, and with the cub he pinned it down, but he didn't actually do anything to her. He didn't hurt that cub in any way or try and actually bite or claw it. It was just more of a display and a show of exactly how powerful he is and how much dominance he does have. So it wasn't really aimed at trying to kill the cub, it's more just to show them that he is the dominant individual within this grouping. Alright, now I think we'll probably find that Tinyo is now going to lie down, but the rest of the pride here should be still quite active, so we'll spend a little bit longer with them. And while we do that, I believe Cheetah, no, James is not a cheetah, but James does have a cheetah, and it is... Indeed, we've got a little cub that's so fat his legs are splayed apart and was eating the tail of the zebra, which is now decided is not full. But if we look at Amber Eyes, who's just standing up to the right here, we can see there are no suckle marks there. There's nothing, no milk whatsoever, no suckling marks at all. So she can't have this cub at the moment. I don't know which female has a cub out of this pride, but none of them that I can see so far have any signs that they've been nursing a cub in the last week or so, which is really strange. It's interesting just to see. So I don't think Amber Eyes can possibly be the mother of that cub, unless they've lost this cub and she's lost her milk. But there's not even any balding around there. Any lioness that would have had a cub within the last 3 weeks will have balding still. The hair doesn't take 1 day to grow back, so very surprising that she doesn't have any signs. Maybe it's one of the other females that's within this group, but I have no idea who this little cub belongs to and who's the actual mother of it. Really strange to see though, because I wonder where that cub came from and what's sort of happened to it since, and whether or not it was even from the Nkuhuma pride, which begs another question as to who it could be. Like I say, I think we've got to just be patient and wait and see who exactly is going to be the one that brings out this cub again and actually sees it. We see it suckling on that individual animal. Then that will answer the questions that we have around this. But Amber Eyes to me does not look like she could be the mother of that cub. There is in no way any sign of suckle marks or even milk that's being generated on her tummy at the moment. See how she's watching the male. The male came around for a little bit and just came to see what was going on here, and then he went back and lay down. But it's so cool just to be spending time with the Nkuhuma pride at the moment. Loving the fact that we're seeing them more and more often again, and that they're spending so much time with us in this area. Now let's see this female here. So Marissa, you're wondering if they're so full, would they still go out and hunt? Well, yes, they are opportunistic lions, so they will take any opportunity they can get. So like I said earlier, if a buffalo walked past here or another zebra, they could then potentially try and hunt that. Being as full as they are right now, I don't think so, but you never know. I have seen lions... Oh, you're right there, Ferg. Ferg's just had a little moment, a little cough there. But I have seen lions on a buffalo kill absolutely full and fat and can't move, and another buffalo arrived and they killed 2 of them. So it's just an opportunistic thing. They will hunt if the opportunity presents itself, but they're not going to actively go looking for food now. They're going to be far happier just sitting here in processing what they have caught and be able to then just feed off what they have. I don't think they're actually going to end up going and actively hunting tonight. I think tonight's going to be just all about digesting food, and we'll find tomorrow they'll then move around again. Look at this one with its leg. It's got this whole leg here that it's busy feeding on. Everybody else is trying to find scraps. All the adult lionesses, and one little cub has found itself the prize piece, which is the entire leg of that zebra. And you can see lots of meat still on there. You're never going to finish all of that, but, well, certainly going to try. And that little cub's quite feisty. It's been growling at all the adult females. It's been causing quite a bit of trouble. So it's interesting just to watch the dynamics between them. So the lioness at the back is the one with the 2 colored, or the opaque eye on her right eye. So her left eye is absolutely fine, but her right eye is developing that sort of opaqueness and that cataract almost. So it looks like she's not going to be seeing out of the right eye as well as she used to, that's for sure. So that's her. Now, let's check her belly. No, she doesn't have any suckle marks that I can see either. I wonder, there's such a mystery, this little cub. Out of nowhere it arrives, and then there's no suckle marks that we can see. And like I say, even if that cub had no longer been alive, there would still be evidence that those females had suckled at some point. And there's just no evidence at the moment that I can see. Given that Ali only saw that cub about 2 weeks ago, they would still be balding around the teats. Well, let's see. We'll sit a little bit longer and try and see if I can't look at every single one of the 5 lionesses and work out what's going on. And these lionesses seem like it's going to be time to start grooming and finishing off the last, and so we'll spend a little bit longer here. While we do that, let's go to James Henry, who has got animals that we don't see here, with an animal that we're still with our pride. But what an epic morning this has been. I don't know when the last time we've ever had wild dogs, lions on a kill, and cheetah on a live drive. Really is quite something. So we really have been spoiled this morning, and hopefully Ali will fight off the gremlins and we'll be able to go back to her with the wild dogs. But it's so cool to see. Meanwhile, our Nkuhuma pride is just really taking it very easy. Our male had a slight meltdown again with one of the females in the distance. He's right at the back there somewhere, hogging his carcass, which is, you can actually hear him every now and then, and you just see the bushes shaking when he gets upset. It's quite funny to watch, actually. But we've been watching this little cub this side with the female having a sort of go at one another over this zebra leg. So the leg has been, so to speak, a bone of contention. There we go. You like that one, Ferg? And you can see, look, every time it tugs on the sinew, the leg moves. So it almost looks like the leg is alive at the moment, and that's because it's pulling on the ligament that moves the actual foot. So there we go. Now you can see from the size of that hoof, and it was not the largest zebra, but it was also not a tiny baby. That hoof is still quite large, and that's why this carcass will have fed all of these lions. But the male was very clever. The reason why he picked up that carcass and just dragged it as quick as he did, as far as he did, is because he's trying to get it under thickets to stop things like vultures and varying other animals starting to see what's going on. So that's why he's moved it as far as he has. But it's quite entertaining just to kind of watch that bush shake every now and then with his grumpiness. And I don't know why he's being such a grumpy boy this morning. He's got a nice big meal there, and he's got a full tummy. He's got all his females around him, so there's no reason to be grumpy. But, well, I suppose if you are a male, every now and then you've got to just assert yourself and assert the dominance over the pride itself. But this little cub is loving this leg. It's going crazy. The other one is still busy tucking into the tail over here. It's pretty much pulled all the hair off the tail and is now trying to just get the last little bits of meat. But it seems to be just having more fun than actually feeding. It's kind of playing with the tail, and every now and then we see the tail being thrown around, and there we go, it's now picked it up. Yes, it's your tail, don't worry. You can see Amber Eyes just watches. She's not too concerned. So that's her there. She's looking really good at the moment as well. And it seems that the youngest female is the one that's got the bite marks more than anybody else. She's got quite a bad wound on the inside of her left leg, and then quite a few around the tail. And I wonder if maybe she hasn't had a run-in with this male prior to when we arrived. There's still quite a bit of meat on that leg, actually. It's going to definitely fill that little cub up, and it's amazing how quickly they actually get through it. When she first started, the whole top section where we see a bone sticking out, that was all full of meat, and slowly but surely this little one has eaten its way down and is now exposing all of that flesh around the lower part of the leg, and has done really well. And look at those claws, massive claws, so cool. You can see why they do damage when they try and catch an animal with claws like that. They just hook them in, and there is nothing that animal can do. Once those are in, there's no way that animal is getting away. Very cool to see. And it's not every day that we get to see the claws out like that, because we know that the lions sheath their claws in and they don't let them come out because they don't want them to blunt too much. And so the only time you really see it is when you're around carcasses, where they stick them out to be able to try and grip that carcass as much as possible while feeding on it. So that was very, very cool. But you can see the girls are all still quite alert. Every now and then you'll find, as a car moves around, so the females all pop their head up and they check, and they know on a carcass like this they need to be a little bit more wary of what's going on. They need to make sure that there's no hyenas arriving, also rival lions that could potentially come in, even though we know where they are now. There's very few lions that move in this area. Perhaps the sticks would move here, but 3 against 5, the Nkuhumas would always win that. But they don't know if the other lions haven't heard this commotion and are going to come into this area to see what's going on. And so you could have a situation where that happens. And that's why they're very alert. While the cubs are busy feeding, they're going to try and make sure that everybody is as safe as possible. Hello, little one. Have you got some hair stuck in your teeth? It's always funny when you see them eating tails and things like this. This is what happens, is that they do get fur stuck in their teeth, and then they sit there trying to get rid of it, and it often takes quite a while to actually get it out. But again, I still don't know who this mother of these cubs are, because all of these lionesses that I can see... Oh, very cheeky. Be careful. Amber Eyes is not one to play around with. She's only going to be tolerant so much, but that shows you just how, loving these lionesses can be towards the cubs. Even when they're a little bit cheeky, sometimes they just allow it to happen and they don't worry too much, and they actually leave them alone and let them kind of carry on. But she must be careful, because like we say, Amber Eyes sometimes doesn't tolerate nonsense like that for very long periods of time. Now, talking about tolerating nonsense, why are you laughing, Peg? I know where I'm going with this. But our tolerance of nonsense, and the one who probably tolerates it the least, is Mr. James Henry, and he's all the way in the Mara, driving around and admiring the beauty that is the